Andrew Mountbatten Windsor is not to be called His Royal Highness anymore. That decision was made years ago, very publicly and very deliberately. And yet, according to a recent report, as his belongings were moved into his new home at Marsh Farm, multiple boxes arrived labelled HRH Office, HRH Sitting Room, even HRH Meeting Room. Not one label. An entire household still organised around a title he is no longer meant to use. And it raises a very simple question. If the title is gone, why are staff still being told to use it? Because what is emerging here is not just a house move, it is a pattern. One that suggests Andrew is still refusing to come to terms with just how far he has fallen. Let's start with what we know. Over the past few days, hundreds of boxes have been delivered to Marsh Farm, a 5-bedroom property on the Sandringham estate. This is where Andrew is now expected to live permanently, following his departure from Royal Lodge. That departure alone was significant. Royal Lodge was a 30-room residence, long associated with senior royal status, and leaving it marked a very visible shift in his position. According to reports, the move did not happen smoothly. It was delayed, with suggestions that downsizing proved difficult, and that Andrew had initially wanted access to more than one property during the transition. Eventually, though, the move went ahead, quietly. At least, that was the intention. Because what has drawn attention is not the move itself, but the details surrounding it. As workers carried boxes into Marsh Farm, several were seen clearly labelled HRH Office, HRH Sitting Room, HRH Meeting Room. And that says a lot, because in royal households, titles are not used casually. Staff do not make assumptions or invent labels. They follow instructions, they follow protocol. Which means those labels reflect how the household is being run, and more importantly, how Andrew still expects to be addressed behind closed doors. Now, officially, he is not permitted to use His Royal Highness in any working or public capacity. That restriction came after his association with Jeffrey Epstein led to his removal from royal duties and the stripping back of his roles. It was part of a broader effort to distance the monarchy from the scandal. So, when those labels appear, it creates an immediate contradiction. Publicly, the title is gone. Privately, it appears to be very much in use. And this is where the story becomes more revealing, because this is not happening in isolation. For years, there have been reports about Andrew's behaviour with staff, descriptions of him as demanding, very particular about protocol, expecting a level of formality that reflects his previous status. He allegedly is still calling himself Prince Andrew behind closed doors. So, the pattern is consistent, and when you place that alongside an entire set of rooms labelled HRH, it begins to feel less like habit and more like expectation. At the same time, everything around him has changed. Marsh Farm is not Royal Lodge. It is a 5-bedroom farmhouse, recently renovated with new carpets and flooring. Probably a beautiful place for many of us, but for him, it is a significant step down from a 30-room estate. Even the security arrangements feel different. An electric fence has reportedly been installed around the property, creating a sense of separation from the rest of the estate. And then there is the fact that the king recently stayed at Sandringham, just 2 miles away, and did not visit him at all. That sent a message. And then there is what happened last month. Andrew was arrested and questioned by police for more than 10 hours. During that time, he was reportedly referred to simply as Detainee A. No titles, no special status, just a neutral identifier used by custody staff. Sources say he was treated like a common criminal, which really set him off. All of this has been a stark contrast. On one side, a system that removes every trace of rank. On the other, a private household is still organised around his former titles and status, still using them as if nothing ever happened. The contents of those boxes add another layer. Clothes, antiques, books, personal belongings. Among them, a copy of My Life on Mars by Colin Pillinger, detailing the Beagle 2 project. Ordinary items on their own, But when placed in the context of this move, carefully packed, clearly labelled, and transported into a much smaller home, they begin to tell a broader story of someone carrying an old life into a very different reality. And alongside all of this, Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, is facing renewed scrutiny of her own. There is now a motion set to be voted on regarding whether she should lose the Freedom of the City of York honour she received in 1987. So while Andrew is settling into Marsh Farm, the wider situation around him continues to evolve, which brings us back to the central issue, those labels. Because they are not just words on boxes. They reflect how a household operates, how staff are instructed, how Andrew expects to be treated. And in this case, they suggest that despite everything that has happened, despite the loss of titles, roles, and public standing, very little may have changed behind the scenes. Maybe it's all been smoke and mirrors this whole time. This is what makes this story so difficult to ignore. Not the move itself, but the possibility that even now, Andrew is still holding on to a version of his position that no longer exists. Behind closed doors, he's living the same life he always has, without consequence. And recent reports say the move itself was not handled quietly behind the scenes either. There were what some outlets described as brazen demands during the transition to Marsh Farm, with staff said to be under pressure to meet very particular expectations as everything was set up to his liking. From how rooms were arranged to how his daily routine would continue, the tone reportedly remained formal and structured, much like it had been at Royal Lodge. Nothing about it suggested a man scaling back. If anything, it suggested someone trying to recreate the same environment, just in a smaller space, with staff still expected to follow the same standards, the same language, and, it would seem, the same title. But if you've been following this for some time, none of this is surprising. Andrew's entitlement goes well beyond what many of us can even imagine, and staff have been speaking out about it for decades. While I find it concerning, maybe even disturbing, he is apparently still using these titles behind closed doors, I can't say I find it surprising. So let me ask you this. Do you think this is simply old habits continuing quietly behind closed doors? Or does it suggest something more deliberate about how he still expects to be addressed? Let me know what you think. And if you want to stay up to date on stories like this, make sure you subscribe. Thanks for watching!